And get started. Call meeting to order. Christie, if you want to do the roll call, please.
Marty,
Present. Present.
Bill,
Bill. Present.
Steve,
Present.
Mary,
Yeah.
we have a quorum.
The introduction of the new planning and zoning commissioners.
So we'd like to introduce, our new, appointed, planning commission, Seth, Howardson and Shannon Dupree. They both, little background, they both previously were on our police focus group as well. So welcome, thank you. And why don't you all come up to the front?
And then they'll be taking the seat of Marty and Vicky, right?
Yeah.
So now Marty can come back. Thank you,
Marty.
thank you for filling the seat for roll call.
You're welcome.
Looks like
Now
we're
we have
live,
that
so
roll.
yes, new roll call.
Yes, new roll call. Shannon? Seth?
Here.
Bill?
Here.
Steve? Mary?
Here
We have a quorum.
on the consent agenda, I need a motion to accept the minutes.
Anyone?
Yep.
Okay, and a second.
And so we got Bill and Shannon.
I'm gonna be learning. No, you're good. You're good.
Jump in whenever you feel like it. Just jump in. I'm
Yeah. There you go. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Does anyone have, do you guys have any questions or do you want a brief summary of what we're looking at or anything?
Be honest, I just figured I kind of just asked questions as we went.
Okay, do you want to give just a brief
But-
explanation of what we're approving for the new members?
For the plat.
Yeah, is that what we're approving right now or?
No, we're doing minutes. right?
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
Okay, anybody opposed? All in favor? Minutes are approved. Okay, at this time, I'm asking for any public comment on agenda item.
Public would like to speak.
Okay.
All right.
Good, well,
Yeah.
I'd like to speak about the PUD ordinance you have. I looked at it, looks good. Don't know that you're gonna get perfect. One of the things that this commission's always tried to do is keep in mind that these were living documents. That if they needed to be changed, they could be changed. Might take a couple of months, but we could get them changed. So I didn't see anything wrong with it. I would support it.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyone else? Nice. Bruce, did you happen to see the changes that were made?
I'm sorry.
Have you happened to see the changes that were made?
Yes.
Okay, did it answer your questions?
Yes.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, excuse me, I kind of lose my voice now and then. Got a cold. What I would like to do at this time, is because of the amount of time we may spend on the PUD, is to go ahead and ask that somebody make a motion to move the new business for the replat ahead of the old business, so that we're not painting them while we're having long discussion. If anybody wants to make a motion to do that,
I'll make a motion.
okay, Billy second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to new business and do the plat, so I'll read that. Excuse me. Kind of grabs me every now and then. A replat for RP 250617 -02, replat of tract A, North Park Commercial Center, Dow Industrial Lot 1, 2.88 acres. And Lot 2, 3.88 acres plus or minus. Does the board have any questions on it?
That's all doing commercial anyway, isn't it? We are members, right?
Three,
That's so commercial, isn't it?
C
I was
three.
thinking-
C3,
Yeah, C3, right, okay.
Can you give us another?
okay. So if you look at your flats here, he is looking to divide, so he purchased this entire entire property. He's looking to divide, into lot one, this, like you said, 2.88 acres, and the second lot is 3.88 acres. If there's, do you have any questions? I am gonna, and have Robbie come up and, give us a little bit of background on what his plan is. And I also have a staff report in there, and you can read that as well, that will help you to kind of understand what the plan is.
Simple replat.
Was it?
Yeah, simple replat.
Robbie, would you like to come up, introduce yourself and where you live and what your plan is? You can get.
Where it's
from me.
located now, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, well, he can answer.
Yes, she asked where the property
Where
was.
it's located.
I'm just so. Sorry.
Yeah, fine. At 40 Highway and Johnson Drive.
Okay, right where they're
That being
doing-
built,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's the property. Yeah. Yes, my name is Robert Hopmer, and as you see, I purchased the property. The purpose of the replat is want to build a building on lot one now, and then want to divide it now ahead of time, and then for future use, maybe put something else on lot two down the road.
You gonna put anything in particular in the building, or can I be that nosy? You know what you're gonna put in?
Still on like the final planning phases of it, but we're thinking like a sports training facility for like young athletes and stuff.
Very good, thanks.
And the size of it is going to be 100 by 230.
Yes.
That's correct, of the building. And it will also have parking
Yes.
right in back. Do they have any other questions? Robert?
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Okay, at this time I'd ask, for a motion to approve.
All right,
All in favor, or any discussion?
Did we get a second?
I'm pretty quiet.
And then you're gonna have to speak up a little.
I'll get there.
Break out the microphones.
Okay. No discussion, then all in favor? Aye, passes. Okay. Anything else you need us to do on that?
Nope.
Okay, then we will go on to, back to the old business. On refining and classifications of the PUD.
And they have this.
Yep, they have that.
Okay, so Shannon and Seth, you don't necessarily see the improvements that have been made to the PUD ordinance, but this has been in front of the planning and zoning already. And, we had a few different elected officials that were interested in making improvements on that. So they were at our previous meeting and we discussed with the planning and zoning, some improvements that needed to be made to better the PUD ordinance. So you can see in the document that was in your packet that anything in yellow were things that we added to the ordinance, that staff added to the ordinance based off of the feedback that was provided by both planning and zoning and elected officials. And then I also provided you guys with the notes that Colin Kerrigan had sent to me. So planning and zoning had advised him to send his feedback to staff and then we would work on implementation of that. So I wanted to make sure you guys had that. I also put, so Colin's notes were from prior to the, revisions, and then I put in here Bruce's comments as well after the revisions. And so those have been, you don't have those, they should be, she handed them out when we got here. So they look like this, is it email? Oh. Might be underneath some stuff.
Yeah, I saw. Didn't know what it was, so.
Okay, so those are Colin and Bruce's, insights or, request for revisions. So I'm just gonna go through, well, actually first, let me just explain a little bit about what the PUD is. So currently we have multiple different zoning districts. So we have like residential, R1, R2, R3, commercial 1, commercial 2, industrial, etc. And what the PUD does is it actually creates an additional zone. So if a developer were to come in and they felt like their project didn't fit into R1, R2, R3, so on and so forth, they could go through this process that's been kind of outlined in this ordinance. And they could go through the process and then they're basically rezoning to or from your typical zone to this PUD zone. So one important thing to realize about this is that it's not an overlay on top of your existing zone. It's completely reframing to a completely new zone in itself. And then it would comply with everything that's been put into this ordinance. So the purpose behind it, there's a couple reasons for it. Typically, they're used for when you have a mixed use zone. So if someone wanted to do something that had commercial property in the front and then also had like multifamily residential included in the project as well, you could do that. It allows for some more unique different types of developments besides just your standard multifamily or standard commercial. It allows for some versatility and some flexibility for the developer. But the key point is that the developer would present to planning and zoning their conceptual idea. And then they would, if that's approved by planning and zoning and the board of aldermen, later they would come back with their final PUD application. And that you would go through that and make sure that they didn't make any drastic changes. And then it would be approved by planning and zoning and the board of aldermen as well. So that's just a little bit of the scope of why we would be adding this. It allows for a little bit of flexibility for our developers, and it allows for some more unique types of development to come to Odessa. Creating a little bit more of a open space and outside of the norm of what development projects would look like. It also allows for them to vary from some of the defined requirements that would be in a current zoning package or zoning code today. So in R1, you're only allowed to have a building X size. You have to have certain parking. You have to have, certain setbacks and things like that. This allows for them to vary away from those. And in reality, the purpose of that variance or in exchange for the variance is the need for open space. So I define in here what open space is, what are examples of open space, but it's kind of a give and take when it comes to the PUD. It's allowing for you to maybe come up with a different size of a project or a different size of a building or different density levels. But you're not doing that just because you want to, or just because it doesn't fit to you have to provide something for the betterment of the community and for the betterment of the residents in that area. So I'm gonna go through, do you have any questions on that? Anybody?
The bottom line, would have to come to us back for approval of whatever they submit,
Yes.
plus the council.
Yes, and I've put quite a few different levers in here because I think a lot of the question before was, does the ordinance give the Planning and Zoning Commission the ability to say, no, we don't like that, or, you know, that's not gonna work for us. It gives it put some language in there. A lot of times you'll see where I put language in, like, for example, on page 2. Section C, section 6, the PUD shall not have a substantially adverse effect on the development of neighboring areas as deemed appropriate by Planning and Zoning Commission. So I've thrown that kind of phrase in there pretty frequently to make sure that it allows you guys the discretion to determine if you feel like it's something that will be impactful positively or negatively to the area. So that's the first one in there that I've added to. So the development standards are a requirement. So one thing that's important, so I've added quite a few different development standards to the ordinance. And one thing that I wanted to point out is whenever you go to page to page hold on, let me find it. Oh, to page 9, so under PUD concept plan criteria. So item number 2 says the PUD concept plan is in conformance with the PUD standards of section 50-555 and all ordinances and regulations of the city. So that gives you already the first catch-all. If they're not in compliance with all of the development standards that are listed here, so there's 15 development standards that are now listed. Right there on the first phase, when they bring you your concept, if they're not in compliance with all of those things, we have the ability to deny. So moving, sorry, I'm jumping around, but moving back to the development standards. So I added number 6, where previously we just said the PUD shall not have a substantial adverse effect of the development of the neighboring area. And then I added as deemed appropriate by planning and zoning. So again, puts that decision on you guys a little bit to determine if that's going to be a positive impact or not. The next item that I added in here was the definition of open space. So if this makes it very clear that what we are seeking is the addition of open space. So it introduces the idea of the intention, and then it lists very clearly what examples of open space would look like. So common open space with a PUD district is encouraged to serve as an environmental amenity or to provide recreational or aesthetic benefit for the collective enjoyment of the development's occupants. Examples of this would be parks, green space, commons, natural areas, preservation of woodlands, recreational trails or walking paths, playgrounds, play courts, storm detention areas designed with landscaping and accessible green space, plazas, courtyards, outdoor seating areas, community gardens, or clubhouse lawns, pools, and recreational areas. So right off the bat, I mean, it's not limited to those things, but right off the bat, we're saying these are things that we would accept as open space. And then it does bring it back to giving you guys an opportunity to be able to add to that. So open space areas should be designed and located to be easily accessible to residents or users of the development. The Planning and Zoning Commission shall review and approve the location, design, and type of open space to ensure that it aligns with the goals of the development and provides meaningful benefit to the occupants. Common open space and facilities shall be owned and maintained by a legally established homeowners association, special district, and other approved entities. So this helps the city. I added this in as well, just to make sure that, you know, it's not being deemed over to the city in any way to put then a liability on us or added costs to city services. The next one is basically requesting that they give or provide to you all a comprehensive landscaping plan along with their submission. So a comprehensive landscaping plan shall be submitted and approved for all PUDs to ensure proper preservation and enhancement of natural features. The next item that was added was some language in there regarding vehicle circulation and and a focus on pedestrians. Because again, the key point of this is to make sure that there is that it's a pedestrian friendly development and that there are those open spaces for pedestrians and people and residents to use. So main vehicle entrances should allow smooth traffic and safe turning, minimizing risk to drivers and pedestrians. Minor streets inside the PUD should not connect to outside local streets in a way that encourages through traffic. Pedestrian paths should be kept separate from vehicle roads as much as possible. If needed, the Planning and Zoning Commission may require pedestrian overpasses or underpasses near schools, playgrounds, shopping, and other busy pedestrian areas. So again, that focus on pedestrians. Non-residential uses must have a direct access to major streets or frontage roads, especially where there are large parking areas. The commission can approve changes to road design, including narrower streets or right of way, if the plan keeps pedestrian and vehicles separated and provides enough parking. So this is one area where we talk about parking. So you'll notice that one of Alderman Kerrigan's concerns was the parking requirement. So in each different current zoning area, residential, you have to have at least 2 parking stalls per each unit that is built. So in a multifamily, you have to have you have to allow for 2 parking stalls per unit that's built. Industrial or commercial, you have to make sure that you have enough parking to accommodate your employees and things like that. It's different by the different types of zones that we have. But again, the purpose and the reason why I didn't directly put restrictions on parking is because the purpose of this is to provide the flexibility to those developers. So if they can come up with a solution to parking that's feasible, then they're allowed to present that to you. But again, you have the ability to decide if you feel like it would have a negative effect on the surrounding areas. And the reduction of parking could very well have a negative effect on the surrounding areas. And you have the ability to deny if you feel like the lack of parking is not there. Do you have any thoughts on that, the way that that's set up? I did compare to other communities to make sure that, or to see how they address parking. And I think typically parking is not blatantly addressed like it would be in a regular zone because of that flexibility component. We want them to be able to, they're utilizing the PUD because the standard zoning practices do not work for their development. So if they present to you, they're going to present to you a parking plan that they feel accommodates. And if you disagree with that, you have the ability to deny the application.
I'm sorry, I just have a question. So I know it's like a little different. Maybe, I don't know, because you said that like. You have to have two spots to park on a family unit. Those new houses going up on Johnson don't have 2 places to park and they're parked on the road now. And it's a no parking street. So how did that happen?
So technically they have 2 places to park because they have the garage and then they have the driveway of
Oh,
each unit.
I don't agree. Because here's the thing, you guys, literally, I moved in where I live at Johnsonville, my mom and dad live. Right on that corner. We moved in before Johnson was even like a through street, right? And when it finally got fixed, it was like on Johnson because of people parked on the street. And I remember it being a big deal when it finally got passed that it's a no parking street now. And now it's just like legal because they have a garage. I don't agree with that at all.
Actually,
Just-
second, yeah.
Yeah, that's an issue.
So do you think parking should be addressed in the PUD? How would you address it?
I don't know yet.
Good answer.
I think girls say that they have to have 2 pad parking spots and not count the garage. And I think if you reframed it like that, that would eliminate that, cause I have the same issue on Marlowe Street,
Oh, yeah.
like when you try to go up, yeah, 9th to Marlowe, that's a non-parking street and people always park there. I've got Amazon parking there and when I had an F-150,
Wide enough for Amazon to get down. I mean, like, you get a delivery truck down and you're
Mhm.
not going anywhere. We're off that street. I
Mhm.
mean. But I don't, yeah, I do think that. It should be addressed in some way.
Well, if there's an ordinance on that, then you'd have to have the police enforce that. Wouldn't you? They'd be talking about tickets or something like that if you're gonna get that taken care of. Yeah,
Well,
with the
this
parking,
wouldn't
correct?
be, this ordinance is dictating prior to construction,
Yeah,
not
prior to, I understand.
enforcement. So this wouldn't be
She was talking
enforcement.
about, yeah.
So you are of the existing residential parking?
no, I'm talking about future.
Right.
To remove that.
Just out of curiosity, let me ask this question, Shauna.
Okay.
Would that not be better handled in the current zoning under residential that parking, if you're required to have 2 parking spaces for vehicles, that would not include a garage?
I
Mhm.
think that's where you would have to address that.
I would, if you address it there, that covers what you're talking about on Johnson Drive,
Mhm.
that the garage isn't counted as a parking spot.
I do, that would eliminate a lot of
I think.
issues.
Yeah.
But I
So,
think you'd be
'cause
better off if you did that in your current residential zoning.
Yeah.
Because you gotta remember, in the PUD, they still have to get, there has to be compliance, there has to be justification why they're going out of that and what are they giving up.
And then if you all feel that there isn't, I guess my thought behind the PUD is that they're not typically going to be bringing to you guys something like a simple, single family development typically. So
It's gonna be like what's over on the hill.
that would be a single family development. They're gonna be bringing something that's maybe a little bit different, or they're wanting to create something that's a little bit different, or should I say the word innovative, or, a little bit outside of the box. So we want to give them the opportunity to present something that could be a little bit different than just our basic codes. But then also give you the ability to say, no, we do not feel like this is enough parking for this development. And you would look at it on a case by case basis.
So it's a denial of the parking, you have the denial of the procedure. In other words, they couldn't go forward unless they can address the parking to the
Yeah.
satisfaction of everybody, correct?
Correct.
Very good.
And the other side of it too is because this is supposed to be more of like a flexible situation, we can't predict what they're going to present to us. So we can't predict if they're gonna have, if it's a mixed use type of situation, we can't say, okay, well, you need to have 2 for every unit. It could be something that doesn't have units, so then it doesn't, there's not a standard blanket statement that can easily apply to each type of proposal that's gonna be presented.
Okay, so then can I ask you a question about, and we haven't got to the next one, but I have thoughts on the next one and how what you just said could apply to that.
Okay.
So if we're saying that residential structures can't be more than 3.5, what if someone comes in with a parking garage with 2 stories and then apartments on top? So would that be automatically declined because of that? Because if so, then I think that should be. Because then we're specifically stating that this PUD can't have those. I could see it being a 2-story garage with the 3.5 stories. But, then you're kind of limiting your aspects.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. So let me go back to the original intention behind this and why this came to be. There was concerns with density and allowing very, higher density types of development in Odessa. So there's, again, you don't have the ability to have this blanket statement because you're looking, the PUD could be any assortment of different types of development. So we were trying to figure out how we could make an impact on density and maybe help control density without saying, you can only have lots this size or coverage of this amount or so X amount of units. That would help us kind of control density. So one way we felt like we could do that was via height. So basically not allowing for, your 6-story multifamily, that would be a high density type of development. So the intention was to try to reduce density to keep that from coming to Odessa. So that was the intent behind it. So very much so open to discussion on how that could be adjusted.
I just think if we intentionally say that like we're afraid of new builds or higher density, then we're not going to see any grocery stores or bigger developments come our way. Because
Yeah, and I think one thing to consider too is that with the, I don't wanna say with high density, but with higher quantities of units, that's where we get more affordable housing options in Odessa. Typically speaking, it's very hard to build and construct a single family home that's affordable in today's economic climate. So affordability comes with density, unfortunately.
I think that's my thought on it. I think that really turns away development right there, we were to look at, so. I feel like there may be a better way for us to word that.
Downtown. Across from UPC, where they built the whole groups and the apartments on top.
Yeah, I'm thinking that kind of
Like
like
something like
makes
that.
me, yeah. Like, because like we're literally saying like, cause I mean, I love Odessa being small, I will be the first one to say that, I love our town. But also, I think if we're not prepared to move into the future and we don't have this, then we're stuck with $1,600 a month apartments and, so I think that there's a way that we should really address this to lead us not have to come back to this PUD multiple times to filter.
And again, the PUD is to allow for things that are different than your typical types of development projects. So allowing for density in the PUD, one, gives you guys the control a little bit versus allowing it in our normal zoning code.
Was it the density or was it the height?
Well, we
Was
were
the
trying to
height
use
controlled?
height to control density.
But we've got several places where it says the height can only be this high
Yeah,
throughout the PUD.
yep,
So if somebody wanted to go higher than that,
they
they
could
could.
not, correct,
So we are limiting.
right. That was the intent behind, in our previous meetings discussion was how can we have an impact on controlling density without altering or restricting the number of units that were allowed.
Okay.
So the question would be, do we want to limit that in Odessa or not?
But as long as we gotta say, I guess it won't make much difference. You got in there what we have to say, they gotta submit it, and if it don't matter, meet to what everybody agrees is best for Odessa, then they don't get it anyway, they gotta review the whole plan. Basically, isn't that it? Yeah, right, that's good, I'm good.
So you're saying allowing for higher, taller development projects, and then you guys would have the ability to determine if it's having an adverse effect?
Thought is,
Yeah.
where exactly would you see, and just thinking about it, where would you see these taller buildings going? You're not gonna want them in your downtown, so we'll take that off the table. You're not gonna want them in a normal residential area. Close to, surrounded by residential, and then a big apartment building sticking out above, how, single family house. So, sorry. So when you think about that, then maybe it needs to be something that's covered in overlays like along the highway, maybe in some of the open areas. If somebody wanted to do something there, that the taller building, it could be done. So maybe we need to think more about an overlay of what's allowed in different districts for those kind of things. You still wouldn't want to allow it in the residential area, you know? That's my thought.
No, I agree with that.
Are we big enough for those really tall buildings?
I think my fear is that if we say no, then if someone sees this and they wanted to bring something here, it would deter. Like if someone wanted to like,
in a hotel.
yeah, or redo like the outlet mall or something, or the areas that are commercial down that way. Like if they wanted, yeah, if they wanted.
You
to
could
bring
still
something.
use the PUD in those different zones, even if we have an overlay. So keeping this in the PUD could still be restrictive.
Mary, you brought up, where could that potentially be? I see two places that it could possibly be a fit. On the hill, west side, east side. Because there's nothing really around it, it would create its own aesthetic value.
Right.
Does that make sense?
We change it
So we
to,
just need to be able to turn it, and we would have that ability to say, no, that tall building's not gonna fit in that area.
That's
I
right.
think the first part of it is really what's concerning. The second part is saying that we won't allow for any buildings larger than 3.5 stories that are adjacent to residential zones. But I don't know that we want to keep the first sentence in there. But we could keep the one that's saying you can't exceed 3.5 stories if you're going to be next to residential.
agree
But
with that.
then how far, but next to residential, 5 feet, 10?
Well, by parcel.
Okay.
So if this parcel is adjacent to, or if there's any other parcels that are around it that are residential, then you couldn't exceed 3.5 stories.
and could you just reword it to where that we have the discretion of where larger buildings could go? You know, and that way, like, if someone came in and said, like Marty said, like over, like, they wanted larger buildings over there, where there's nothing at. Then we could say, hey, that's fine, but if they wanted to build it downtown by the 1912 building, obviously, we're gonna say no.
Yeah.
You know, so.
So I think that second sentence would allow that. We're saying no way you can have over 3.5 stories if you're going to be next to residential. But it leaves it open to having 3.5 stories that is not adjacent to a residential lot. So if someone wanted to build on 40 highway, a multifamily, commercial, mixed-use commercial property that's 4 stories tall, they could do so because it's not gonna be next to residential.
Let me ask this question. If you look at the hill, say half of it's single family, limited to that. Would you want the other half to be not limited in height? See, that creates that aesthetic view that I'm talking about. And that's why that second sentence makes more sense there.
Yeah.
It has to be, you're in a PUD, you're creating an area. So it's just creating its own aesthetic value, if you will.
I think the second sentence of
Yeah,
That's what we
I
want. and removing the first,
Yeah, that's where I was at, just making sure that we had the discretion to,
yeah.
you know,
and you may wanna say single R1 and R2, because typically those are, could be 2 stories, but typically they're single. Okay, in an apartment, 20 unit apartment building that's 2 stories, it may not necessarily be out of way, you know?
Because they could put in a multifamily. Mixed use with commercial along 40 highway. If we just said blanket residential, then if another one wanted to come in next to that, then they couldn't
Yep.
technically. So like adding the R1, R2, and then adding a discretionary clause for planning and zoning. Okay. Can do. All right, so section 11. This adds, this kind of speaks to the conversation that we're having, but it it's adding that separation between, the neighboring, between the development and the neighbors. So, what this is, I'll just read it. Each PUD district shall be designed to provide reasonable visual and acoustical privacy for dwelling units. The use of fences, landscaping, walls, or other appropriate barriers shall be incorporated for the protection of property, enhancement of aesthetics, and preservation of privacy, as well as to screen objectable views or uses and reduce noise. High-rise buildings, if included, shall be located within the development in a manner that minimizes adverse impacts on adjoining low-rise buildings and protects the privacy of their occupants. Yard setbacks, lot size, dwelling unit type, building height, frontage, and use restrictions may be modified for the PUD, provided the overall development plan upholds the general spirit and the intent of zoning as determined by the Planning and Zoning Commission. To ensure appropriate transition to adjacent properties, all PUD developments should provide either a 50-foot minimum perimeter setback around the entire development, or should add the adequate transition barrier such as fencing, berms, landscaping, or other buffering treatments as approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. If topographical or other existing features do not provide reasonable privacy or buffering for adjoining uses, the Planning and Zoning Commission may require additional screening, setbacks, and other mitigation measures to protect adjacent properties. So it gives that transition between different use types, and it gives them, they either have to scooch everything back the 50 feet or provide that barrier, that transition barrier. And then it also gives you the ability to say, if they come up and say, well, we've planted some pine trees that'll, grow in the next 20 years, you can say, that's not enough, you need to add more to that, and you can dictate what that addition would be.
Could I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
What is a high-rise building?
That's a good question. That's a valid question.
Because that would be, if I take it from just simple thought, we're saying 45 feet is the maximum height. To me, it would be anything over that.
I agree.
So, and then therefore, you're allowing just what Seth's talking about in the potential for there being a taller building.
So what do we think we should limit that high rise to be?
Well, as long as we gotta say so. As long as they still gotta submit it, we tell them they can't build it that high. I don't see what that, as long as it's in there, as long as we
So
got
I
that, we
think-
got ourselves covered.
We could say high rise buildings defined as greater than 3.5 stories.
Or you got to, where they have to,
I would say structures larger than 3.5 stories.
Okay.
That way it includes parking garages, like just big metal buildings, anything.
Because there are some of those warehouses that are greater than that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Alrighty. Moving on to the next section, so. This gives a little bit of, speaks back to you're able to deviate from X, Y, or Z. Given that you have the addition of open space, which we've defined of what we intend open space to look like. So, within a PUD district, minimum front, side, and rear setbacks, lot coverage, and lot size requirements may be reduced from the dimensional standards typically required for the type of use proposed, as determined by the Planning and Zoning Commission, provided that the development plan incorporates additional green space in an amount equivalent to the total area reduced. So it's a little bit of quantifying of saying, okay, you're gonna tell us exactly what you're bearing by to what amount, and then we are expecting you to provide us with an equal amount of open space. At minimum.
So that's like the normal, like, isn't it 15 feet or whatever?
10 feet is our side setback for residential. It's different for each one. Like, so for example, commercial, there's 0 setback. But this is, again, speaks a little bit to density in a way because, those setbacks, the coverage, the lot size, those are things that are going to impact density. As those things are reduced, density is increased. But we're giving them the flexibility to present us with a reason why they're varying from those requirements and what they're going to provide in exchange for that.
And a parking lot is not green space.
No,
Okay,
it is not.
it's just one clarification.
Yeah, no, it is not. No. And that's where we kind of defined at the beginning of our changes, we kind of defined what we would anticipate to be open space. It's defined on.
So they put duplexes around it or something like that, would that be a buffer? How could you? Could that be in there? No, they gotta be open space.
Number 7 defines open space. Okay. So the last sentence even kind of defines what we're trying to do here. The purpose of this provision is to ensure that any increase in building intensity or density is balanced by meaningful open space and site amenities. 13. So this just is adding the ability for phasing. So I won't go into detail again. It gives you that, you have the ability to approve the phasing plan. At the end of this entire ordinance, it gives a little bit more of a definition of what the phasing would look like and what they're allowed to do and how they're able to modify that phasing if need be. So this is something new that was not in the previous one, but just we wanted to make sure that we accommodated and addressed the need for phasing, because we do see that often with development projects. Number 14. This is where we wanted to make sure I did elaborate more in depth than what was previously put in here. So the point of this is to say that if hypothetically, if you're needing to put in a major water line to be able to service this development, that the city's not responsible for bearing that cost. And then I also added some stormwater management requirements because that's something that we oftentimes fail to manage in our current code. So I want to make sure that if we're bringing in something that's different or unique, or a larger development project, that stormwater is addressed and adequately addressed. And then in no case shall a PUD district be less than 2 acres in size or no less than 5 acres of size in commercial or industrial areas. So at our previous meeting, we just talked about less than, it can be no less than 2 acres in size, but I went ahead and took it a step further by adding that it also needs to be no less than 5 acres in size for commercial and industrial. Is everyone okay with that addition?
So if they mix them, would that 5 acres stay the same?
That's a good question.
What'd she say?
If it's a mixed development and has residential and commercial in it,
If it's a PUD, it's gotta fall into one of those 2 things, 2 or 5 acres.
Okay, so yeah, that's right.
See, it's a PUD, the PUD is potentially mixed development.
yeah, but
Okay,
she's
okay.
saying, cause it's saying 2 acres if it's residential, 5 acres if it's commercial or industrial. So what if it's commercial and
If
residential?
you're primarily looking at commercial only, then it's saying 5 acres. If your primary is residential, then it's 2 acres. If it's mixed, I think you look at that because that's gonna get you commercial, so you can take the worst case scenario, which would be 5 acres. Can't be any smaller than that. Doesn't mean it can't be bigger. It just can't be any smaller. Because otherwise you get into that real issue of open space, parking. Are we gonna have to fudge a lot on setbacks?
Going larger and higher, you're gonna need more because you're gonna need more parking.
So we can add if it's a mixed use with both residential and commercial or industrial, which industrial is probably pretty rare, but just to be safe, then it would be no less than 5 acres. We'll add that. Okay, so now we're going on to the review side of this. So, you know, the next section is going to just kind of overview the process and the application process. But what I've done here is we've added quite a few requirements of them in that, concept design standard. So I wanted to make sure that what's in the application and what's provided by the developer is going to give you guys enough information to make any determinations off of that. So a lot of the additions here are based off of what was was added to the previous section. So your typical application is gonna have these standard requirements from them. So your filing fee, legal description of the parcel, present zone, any names or addresses of all the owners and parcels included on the proposed PUD and their designated representative, you know, all the signatures and notaries that you're gonna need, and then the name of all of your property owners within 185 feet of the boundaries, because we're gonna need to give them proper public notice of everyone within 185 feet. I added number 8, going back to that stormwater improvement, so making sure that they are providing to you the stormwater plan. That is now a requirement that demonstrates how stormwater will be controlled and treated on site consistent with applicable city codes and stormwater management regulations. So not only do they need to check the stormwater box, but they need to prove that they have checked that stormwater box. And then, go ahead.
Really quick, can you add something that like it would fall on the developer to pay for the public notice
Yes.
in here? That it wouldn't fall on the city to,
So the way that we typically will do that is, so this says filing fee, so in the in our schedule of fees, we'll put in the fee amount and say plus public notice fees.
Okay.
That's typically how we do that with like variances or any other types of applications. We'll say this amount plus any notice fees. And then we'll invoice them separately. So, one of the things that is very important is that they provide, you know, the maps for you guys, any site plan information and things like that. So number 9 is going to ask them to provide that detail and explain it to an extent. So a proposed plan for the development of the PUD, which shall include the following information and supporting maps. So our current code does not dictate the need for a site plan very well, if at all. So I want to make sure that that's a requirement here, and we'll get that fixed moving forward on the rest of it. But, so you have to, you know, you provide any of the contours and site conditions, as well as the floodplain information and natural features. You'll have to propose or add the proposed lot lines and the location of floor area size of all existing and proposed buildings, structures, and other improvements, including the minimum heights, types, dwelling units, density per type, and non-residential structures. So this is asking them to show exactly what the density is going to be. And then remember everything that they're showing here, they have to come back on the final plan review, come back to you and show that they have not varied within X amount for these different things. The location and size of all of the open space. So they need to show exactly what type of open space they're going to be adding and the size in acreage of that. And then for traffic and parking, the existing and proposed circulation system for arterial collector and local streets, including off-street parking. So this right here is where they need to show you exactly how they plan to address parking, and then any internal streets as well. And then again, bringing it back to the pedestrian need and the focus on pedestrians. They need to show existing and proposed pedestrian circulation systems, including its interrelationship with vehicle circulation and proposed treatments at points of conflict.
Well, when they send, we're gonna get a full plan of the building, the parking, the sidewalks, the lights, the whole 9 yards. We get to see that all done, complete on that like that, so we'll have a better perspective.
Yes,
Very good.
exactly.
What's the timeline? Is it, when they come, is it? If I want to put something in, do I have to have all this done before I present it?
The
Or do I invest
idea,
in Higginsville?
yeah, the idea is that they're gonna come to you with more of a conceptual engineer drawing. Then they will go get their, if that's approved, then they'll go get their actual engineered construction plans, and then that will come back at the final review to make sure that those construction plans are in line with what they previously already presented to you.
Okay.
So all of this will be approved before they start construction, but the idea is that there's a big financial difference between your concept engineering and your construction engineering. So the concept is associated with your concept engineering, and the final is associated with your construction plans and your final engineering.
And when they come back with that final, we're smart people. But will we have somebody within the city that we can take it back to and say, hey,
Yes,
I mean, engineer or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
We
Yes.
typically review by engineers and staff before it ever gets to us.
we always have our engineers
so
review.
it'll all be,
It's all laid out, all that elevations and all that ought to be in right of ways, all this and that.
So what, we always have our engineers review those plans before any approvals to make sure that they're in compliance with all of our code and ordinances and building code as well.
Very good, very good.
that makes this a lot easier.
Yeah, you guys are really, you're approving the concept plan, and then you're approving that they didn't vary from that concept plan within so much. So we don't want them to come and say, we want this PUD, it's gonna be this density, we're gonna vary this much, we're gonna provide this much open space. And then they go and get their construction drawings done, and they've taken out over half of the open space, increased density, reduced, they can't vary that much from what was just a concept and an idea to what's actual reality. So you guys are really at the final phase, you're not approving to make sure it's in compliance with the rest of our ordinances or in compliance with building code or anything like that. That's gonna be between our engineers and IBTS. You guys are just here to say that, no, you can still do this PUD because you still have the same plan as originally proposed, and you're not gonna try to switch it up on us and go a completely different direction right before construction. Okay?
Quickly, sorry, what is the expectation of us? Like, are we approving the concept the same night we see it? Do we get to gel
The same
on it?
what?
Like, so if they bring us the concept, do we approve it that night, or are we going to have time?
That would be the decision of you all, so we'll try to get you, typically with planning and zoning, we'll get the plans to you the Friday before. We didn't this time, but we get them to you the Friday before, and your meeting will be on a Thursday. And then if you guys sit here and you're like, you know what, I need more time, you guys will take a vote to postpone it to the next meeting or whatever it is. You have that.
Okay.
And that's with everything, not just PUDs. That's with anything that comes before you guys.
Thank
Mhm. Okay, so the pedestrian, and then we also wanna,
That's not gonna be affected by the 60-day limit if something's proposed.
I mean, with building permits?
Like the preliminary plat.
Well, this
Act-
isn't associated with,
Within 60
60
days.
days. That's correct. But
well, and that would be a 30-day delay, so we'd still be within that window. And this doesn't have that, so preliminary plots, final plots, all that would have that rec stipulation, and this is separate from your preliminary.
I just wanna make sure that
And it says that in here, that this is a completely separate process than your preliminary and final plats.
because I just see somebody reading that and going, but.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's fair for the planning and zoning to be able to take the time that they need. And this is separate from preliminary and final plat, so I think it's all right. I'll confirm it with our attorneys. Okay, so moving on, the next one is that they need to provide us with all the existing and proposed utility systems, including sanitary sewer, stormwater, water, or storm sewer, water, electric, gas, and telephone lines. They also need to provide us with that landscaping plan. And then information on adjacent land, including land uses. So this helps with that perimeter and understanding that perimeter. So they need to tell us exactly what is in the surrounding areas around them, what it's zoned as, what the uses are, et cetera.
Does that need to be updated?
Hmm.
The sanitary, does that need to add the cable and the fiber internet lines?
That, I guess that would fall under telephone lines.
I'm just wanting to double check that, like, we're not
We'll,
pigeonholing us out of a certain utility.
we'll change it to telecommunication. That should hit it. Okay, landscaping, information on the adjacent. And again, the information on the adjacent land. That's really going to give you that information and help you make that determination on that adverse effect. So we're wanting to know if this development is going to have an adverse effect on the surrounding area. So they have to provide you with the information on that surrounding area, so you know those details of what is there.
Or something like this, if we put it, but get talking about a big development. No bigger than Odessa is, as far as the sewer system, water, everything like that, with the capacity at the time when we have the ability to be able to have the capacity to maintain this, to have enough water for the sewer. If we have to build a treatment plant and get more water, then that would change the whole thing, man.
Yep, and that's in there that, where is that? Basically that this, I guess that's where it's saying. Is that where it's saying?
The infrastructure part of it.
Oh, the city shall bear no, is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the infrastructure has to be there to do it,
Yes.
Right.
or
And
you
if
have to
it's,
put
if
it in
it's
as
not
the
been.
development.
Yeah, if the infrastructure is not there, the city's not responsible for upgrading to accommodate you, you need to upgrade.
Very good, right, thank you.
They have to show us the proposed perimeter treatment, how they're gonna address the 50-foot perimeter or the transition, the natural transitions. And then we put some clauses in there, any other requirements necessary for development of the PUD as required by this chapter or other city codes, and any additional information or documents that the city may require to evaluate the character and impact of the proposed PUD, as well as their proposed timeline and then phasing plan. So once they propose that timeline, they're then obligated to maintain that timeline that they originally proposed. Okay, so that is what you would be receiving and evaluating after the concept plan has been submitted. The next kind of goes into a little bit of that procedure and kind of how staff will, accept the application. Oh, we do have that clause in there. Okay, upon receipt of a completed application, the community development coordinator or designee shall review the application for compliance of this chapter. The community development coordinator shall place the application on the Planning and Zoning Commission within 60 days of verification of an application in compliance with this chapter, as long as such placement on the agenda allows for adequate public notice. So it does not specify that how long planning and zoning has to evaluate it, just that staff have to get it to planning and zoning within the 60 days.
Yeah, I think you might want to get that clarified so that doesn't get caught up with, action has to be taken within 60 days.
But when over 60 days, couldn't we default and they could do anything they want to? Isn't there something like that? We got so many days.
You know,
it has
they
to be done.
technically go to the Board of Alderpersons,
Right, yeah.
but I would encourage us to avoid that.
Right, yeah, right, yeah.
You know, you're appointed by the alderpersons to be their liaison in this process. And it could end up with a nightmare. But, and I noticed this does say, 60 days of verification of an application in compliance. So the application has to be in compliance with everything. And then sufficient notice for public notification.
Yeah.
So that may be adequate enough, you know what I'm saying, to meet that 60-day. But it might not hurt to just check.
But then we ought to know what we're gonna get anyway. After all that's in compliance, we ought to know what it's gonna be. So we didn't have 60 days after it comes to that.
I'll get confirmation.
Theoretically, yeah.
Okay, very good.
I'll get confirmation, but the way that I interpret this is that, staff have 60 days to present it to you, and then there's not any type of time restriction on how long you have to approve it.
Very good.
Yeah, it's a 60-day compliance and all that just simply is, the application is in compliance with the chapter, okay?
So they can't give staff a half completed application and then say, why didn't you get this to the planning and
60
zoning in
days.
60 days?
I
The
see.
answer would be, you'd have 60 days until, from the time that you have a planning and zoning ready application, you then have staff has 60 days to get it to you. Because-
And I like the part there too, pardon me, Sean, about the sufficient time for public notification. Because theoretically, you could fall in that 60-day window and still not have the time to do the adequate public notification,
Mhm. Mhm.
okay?
But you got that open in now, don't you?
Yeah.
So we got the time.
Yeah, that's covered here.
Yeah.
Okay, so, so then the number 4 lists the different criteria that you have to approve. So again, everything in the design standard, you have the ability, as long as those standards are met, that gives you a criteria area to approve on. So this is something that I find really valuable because, you know, we have BZA, for example. Well, we have, you know, these variances and things that are going in front of BZA, but the ordinance does not give specific criteria as to what they are using to determine if a variance can be allowed or not. So I really like that this gives you the specific criteria that you guys are gonna be using. It gives you kind of a map and a guideline on whenever one does come to you, okay, these are the things we need to be looking for. So those are listed under number 4. I added the stormwater. We need to make sure that stormwater addresses both stormwater quantity and quality, protects the adjacent properties from adverse stormwater impacts, and complies with applicable stormwater ordinance. A lot of times we see where, okay, we're gonna require stormwater, a stormwater analysis, but that stormwater analysis is only providing the stormwater analysis for their parcel, and it doesn't look at the adjacent properties, and that's kind of the whole point behind getting this type of a stormwater report from a developer, is that we know how it's going to impact those in the surrounding areas and that it won't impact.
Right on, that's good, yeah.
So also something that needs to be improved upon in our actual ordinance. The PUD concept plan does not negatively affect the aesthetics, vehicle traffic pattern, and pedestrian use for the users and uses within adjacent districts. So we've added that as well.
So whose decision is it what aesthetics are?
You all.
Prime example would be the multi-story would be a good example. Maybe their structures around are brick. And they're gonna put metal.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things in here that give you guys a lot more control than what you normally would have on design and variations of the development. Okay, so now we're going on to the final plan. So then again, you have that final plan review criteria under section 4, page 11. So any increase of 10% or more in density or intensity, including the number of housing units per acre or the amount of non-residential floor area per acre. So again, they were asked to provide that information on density for you in the concept. So now they're coming back to you with a more final engineered plan. And now we want to make sure that they did not vary from that density any more than what they previously conceptually brought to you. A change in the mix of housing types or the amount of land area devoted to non-residential use. We want to make sure that they haven't varied from that, or a reduction in the amount of open space. That's a very big one.
Engineering though is gonna review all that too before we even see it, the one thing, all that.
Well, yeah, staff staff will review this to make sure, but this is the criteria that you're going to be looking at whenever final is due to you.
Right.
A reduction in the amount of open space, so that one's very important, because again, the key point and factor to this is that if you're going to vary, if you're gonna, kind of create a different path here, you need to do that in exchange for the betterment of the development, and the better the development is viewed by us in the terms of open space. So we want to make sure that they're not drastically reducing the amount of open space that got them here to begin with. Any change to the vehicular system that results in significant change in the amount or location of streets, common parking areas, and access to the PUD. So we want to make sure that they didn't say that they were gonna have X amount of parking, and then they come back and they have less parking than they originally planned.
I guess to make it, if they want to do some kind of elevated parking too, that all come in the scenario.
Yeah, parking in general. So, and then any change within 50 feet of the residential district or less intensive zoning district. So this again goes back to that 50-foot parameter and the segregation or separation between different use types of the neighboring parcels or adjacent parcels. Any change determined by planning and zoning to represent an increase in development intensity. So again, another kind of catch-all for you guys to be like, well, wait a minute. Just because you didn't change density or intensity by altering the number of units or the housing type, but you did alter something that's not listed here, and that's going to end up resulting in a change in the intensity, then this gives you the ability to be like, okay, wait a minute, that's not going to work either. A change in use categories or a substantial change in the layout of buildings. So it doesn't allow for much room for variation, but that is the
That's good.
enter point.
That's
Is
good,
that
yeah.
you had a concept and you need to kind of stick to that concept in order to have kind of, lack of better words, but the privilege to have this PUD zone. And then once this final step is approved, at that point, that's when you are rezoning the parcel. So if this is then approved by planning and zoning and the Board of Aldermen, then at that point, once you have final approval, then you're officially rezoning from whatever you were zoned as previously to a PUD district zone. And then I've added just a couple things on the end here.
That's
Uh-huh.
under number 3.
Yeah.
Procedure, and then 2. Is that supposed to be almost identical to? It's not really the application, is it?
Where are you at? I'm sorry.
It's-
Page 10.
You have page. This is about that.
Yep, it's just for the next step. So this one,
It's an application,
yep,
still an application.
yep, it's still an application on the final, yes, technically speaking.
Okay,
It's an application for final approval.
okay.
They're still applying for your approval. It's still considered an application. They're still going to be presenting to you the same, same documentation, same requirements, same site information.
There's 2 public hearings.
I believe so. Yes, 15 days notice for the final and 15 days notice for the concept.
See, you guys are gonna typically, when you have a development, you're gonna get that twice, okay? You're gonna approve a preliminary, and then you would approve a final. Preliminary says, okay, we kind of like the concept, bring it back into us in its final form. And that's what you're gonna approve, and then either you recommend it to the Board of Alderpersons for their approval, okay? You're not really the approving body, you're gonna say, okay, it meets all the criteria, so we're good to send it on to the Board of Alderpersons for their approval. And
And you're gonna have, typically, this is just typical planning and zoning stuff, not necessarily dedicated to the PUD, but like tonight, you have a replat. The replat is an adjustment to something that's already been preliminary platted and final platted. So you only are seeing this one time because it's already been through that process when it was originally created. So whenever you have a new subdivision, you're gonna get a preliminary plat, then you're gonna get a final plat. You're gonna approve both times. But like a replat, that's technically, that parcel of land has already been preliminary platted or final platted. So now you're just replatting something that was already existing. But if it's a subdivision or something like that, we're gonna need a preliminary plat and a final plat to subdivide it. And then so we're treating this with that same kind of process flow where we need a concept and then you need to come back to us with that final. We're going to approve both of those. So lastly, I added these modification and amendments and then phasing of the development. So we've added and said, or one of the modifications and amendments, we wanted to make sure there was some language in there that addressed if, it is approved at the final or is approved at, different phases or just at the final. After it's approved from the final, are they able to, if they want to add one more unit to the entire project, does that need to come back to planning and zoning, or is that something that can be approved administratively? Or if they're gonna add 50 units, maybe that needs to come back and be approved by the planning and zoning. So that's what this section E is dictating, is that there is a little bit of flexibility of what can be approved administratively after the final, and then what needs to come back to planning and zoning.
it's not that, most of this right.
And then the last thing on here is the phasing of the development. So we added in an earlier section of the ordinance that you can phase the project. So we wanted to add some stipulation in there of what phasing would look like, and what would be required of them. Mostly that they need to provide you guys with that phasing plan and what details should be included in that phasing plan. And you guys are technically approving the phasing plan at the same time as the actual plan itself.
Can I have one quick, that number 5 down there, the effect of the approval, the lap to the approval, could you just run through that real quick down at the bottom here on number 5? Please.
This ordinance shall be in full effect from and after its passage of approval. Full force shall be in full force and effect from and after its passage and approval. So that's typical kind of language that we put into all ordinances. And it's just saying that, like, from the date that the Board of Aldermen approves this ordinance, now you are free to utilize this ordinance. It's in full force and effect.
Okay, very good, thank you. Good.
All right.
I have a question about the phase, like, is there anything that we've got in there that's like, if they decide not to finish a phase, like, say they build 2 phases and then they run out of money, like. And then they're like.
I would say, generally speaking, a member at the concept, they have to provide you with a timeline, and then they're obligated to stick with that timeline. What the repercussion of that would be, each approved phase of the development in substantial compliance with approval through plans and within the timeline established, failure to meet phasing requirements may result in suspension of permits and other enforcement actions. So I guess it doesn't necessarily address if,
They can be sued or something, you know, it's like on a big project, if you go over time, you can get, you know, liquidated damages, stuff like that, if you're not done with their appropriate
yeah,
time.
but this wouldn't have, we wouldn't necessarily have like a construction type of agreement with them to construct their own development, so not necessarily for this.
Okay.
That's a good question. I'll have to get more information on that, how we could add that language to make sure that they complete the project. But I mean, to an extent, if, you know, we try to put things in there that if you, if you don't complete the project within, X amount of time, that you have to, like, the approval of this does not perpetually stand. And I think that is addressed in the,
That's in 5, and what we were getting, what you was talking about in there or some degree.
It's in
No
there.
longer in effect. Yeah,
It's in there. The other thing again, I've said it 100 times. I would just advise you cautiously allowing phasing.
cautiously, is that what it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
It's in other words, you get one done, then we'll worry about doing 2.
I
then
would
like-
be apprehensive about.
Got doing it that way, I see.
Because I just don't like the idea of, you know, you get half of the project done and then it's an eyesore.
Mhm.
How do we find somebody to?
Yeah, what if I go bankrupt, and that's.
well, you're
Yeah, what if belly up?
approving the timeline. So when they propose a timeline to you, if it's too lengthy of a timeline, then you can deny.
Well, but I mean, but that's not gonna stop anything that pops up.
Or if you're responsible for it, maybe that's what she's saying.
You know, I mean, yeah. like,
Yeah.
who's
That's a legal question. I'll have to ask the attorneys on that, because if they run out of money, we can't force them to complete it if they have no money.
Can we
So,
also? Could we put a provision, and this may be a legal question, that they have to show us the funds for each phase that they already have, or something like
like
that?
the-
Can we require a bond?
Yeah,
Yeah, I gotta say, it would be a bond, I'm sure, on something like that. Yeah.
performance guarantees under the phasing. So, the city may require financial guarantees or other security measures to ensure completion of infrastructure and amenities within each phase before subsequent phases proceed.
But you guys have checked their finances anyway, and you'd wanna know they got, you know what I mean, when they have the credit or something like that, you making sure they're bonded and all and insured and everything.
Yeah, so we can change that to require that instead of the city may require, we can make it a more
Require,
mandatory
yeah,
requirement.
Yeah, I just don't feel comfortable if we don't know, because like I said, it could. If it's just not finished and it's halfway, now you're not gonna be able to
But
put
what-
people in or business in if it's not complete, and then what, it's just gonna sit there.
Mhm.
And actually, it becomes a violation. What comes codes of violation.
That's
yeah,
true.
then it kind of.
Well, it's hard to inspect
That's very hard to inspect. We
Right.
have a,
if you've got
uh,
never. ending.
outlet mall type of.
Right.
situation.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but
You
then
know, kind of
kind
like an animal.
of, does it fall back, like, since we kind of made this like an HOA, like they have to take care of it, and then they run out of money, and then they have no one to take care of it, then does that fall to the city to take care of it, and then it
It'd
becomes.
be
sold
code
as-
enforcement.
Yeah.
But I mean, to an extent, some of that's inevitable. We can't
Yeah.
control people's finances or the economy or how things work that way.
But you'd have a good idea before you let us do it though, before we approved it all, I mean, you guys have checked all that.
And, we also have, we could add some language, so we say performance guarantees, that's typically in the format of performance bonds. So if they don't complete the project, then there's some financial help there. And we need to cash in those performance bonds.
Can we also put in there that phasing is a less like a less, I don't know, some kind of like.
Deterrent.
Yeah,
I think
it's-
require, I mean, these types of things, performance bonds, providing their financial guarantees and security measures and things, those are something that. So we're saying that those are required if you're going to do phasing. So it's an added expense to phase out the project.
Maybe all infrastructure for the entire project be in before any phasing is allowed.
you know?
Anything like that, yeah, I'm like you, yeah, faith, yeah. Something, yes.
Yeah, I don't hate that, I don't hate like structure being put in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just feel like I mean, if that's where we're in, it's.
That every phase has to be
Gonna-
complete before the other phase can start. Have that in there, I mean, it's gotta be done, set, grass, trees, over 9 yards, then you can start the second phase, you know.
Yeah, I'm also curious what legal.
Or we just take out phasing, that's all the other alternative here.
Yeah.
But I mean,
May not be a
we
bad thing, I, yeah.
anticipate that these would be
If
typically
you take
some
it out.
larger projects,
Yeah,
and I think that.
They could always propose in phases.
Yeah,
or
resubmit another,
be-
resubmit it.
Opposed to them.
Yeah.
Like, what if they brought us this big thing? Could we then say to them, hey, we think it would be better done as a phase? Can you do it that way, or that's something that we can even?
I wouldn't want to propose phase to me personally. If you're,
Yeah, that-
if you don't want to allow phasing, it shouldn't be proposed by them or us.
But don't forget, you have the ability to approve or deny the phasing plan overall. So if you think that it's not a good plan or that it doesn't include all of the upfront infrastructure or something like that in phase one, then you can deny or
Have some real assurances in there, right, yeah, okay. I guess that'd be good.
I was gonna say though, but at the end of the day, if we're not comfortable with, I mean, I just would hate for them to do all this work
Mhm.
if we are still like, I just feel like if we're still uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's a lot of work for somebody if we're just gonna say no. because
So
we're
do we-
sure of what that stuff entails, you know?
Do we want to? So we need to add some performance measures in there. A little bit more detail on what would be required for performance, bonds and situations like that. And then we maybe want to add something that says that the base infrastructure, which is gonna be your water, sewer, streets, those, like the roots of the infrastructure have to be put in phase one. Cause like she said, it does make the project easier to turn over or sell to a different person if they do run out of money, if that infrastructure is already put in the first phase.
If that's saying there's commitment,
Yeah, no, I like that. I agree with that, cause I think of, in Branson, there was these mini mansions built and they came through and built them and never finished them, and then they just dilapidated and just sat there for 20 years. So,
Yeah.
you know, I
Under
wanna
bridge,
avoid
under
anything like
speed.
that.
That's where you gotta get your bonds and your insurance and the money and creditors and all this and that, you gotta have all the ducks in a row if you cut them loose, to do anything, yeah.
somebody that typically that's gonna come in here with a PUD, they're gonna be able to do it.
Yeah.
Because remember, you're talking about a minimum 2 acre residential, 5 acre mixed or commercial. And that sounds like a lot, but it's not really.
The other thing too is you have to be careful and weigh out the amount of barriers that you're putting on the developer. Yes, we want to make sure that things get done, but at the same time, they're looking at these as barriers and hoops and constraints that turn them off from developing in Odessa overall.
It makes it go down the road.
Yeah.
Get
Yeah,
done.
I think the infrastructure makes me feel more comfortable. I just wanna make sure that they're gonna,
Is that
Right.
a standard practice in other states?
I don't know. I have to look.
I think a lot of them are different.
Yeah.
I think there is no real, the standard is we're different.
Standard is we're all gonna do it for it.
Infrastructure going in versus the standard.
Yeah, I think that's.
I mean, it's assumed
It all
that it would
depends
go
on
in first.
development, what you're doing, what you're putting in.
Yeah. So Oak Grove didn't require it, with one of their big phased residences because, that's been very controversial because it's the road that would go to Meadow Park. And it won't be constructed until they build like 3 or 4 phases of housing. So I know they don't require it. Don't know about anybody else, no.
Or like, for example, the hill, that would be a situation where maybe you wouldn't want the entire infrastructure, because they're eventually going to connect to 40 highway. And if you have no houses there, you're gonna have a high traffic, high speed, well, people going beyond what the speed limit is, trying to get to the interstate and going through a residential subdivision that's not built yet. That'd be same situation where they built out the whole thing, but now you just created this open through.
Or would we have to do some of that, give some consideration to that, on as to where they're gonna put the overpass on, whether we let them put things down here? Wouldn't there be some constraint as to where they're, until they get the overpass in, the interstate in and all that, is whether, to make sure something like that didn't happen?
Yeah, MoDOT would approve or deny their ability to connect to 40 highway. Or the city wouldn't approve that.
Or-
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe we. Again, I think we maybe just need to put some more, allowances that give you guys the ability to determine, because there could be scenarios where we don't want them to build out all of the infrastructure for this huge development. And then we've got something to have to enforce or have a negative impact on the area. But I do think, I mean, you have the ability to approve or deny the plan as it's proposed or not,
So
so.
then could you restate it to be like they have to finish the infrastructure on the phase that they're, before they start?
I did see, there was other ones that said like you have to complete 20%, I think it was, the way that Sedelius was written was it said, you had to complete 20% of the residential units before you could start construction on the commercial units. Which I didn't quite understand the purpose behind that, so I moved away from that.
I'm just thinking like. If we're doing it in phases, if there's a way to state like, you almost like before you, I just, instead of like. Starting different phases, if like the rules were like, you have to finish one phase
Yeah,
prior
yeah,
to.
because the one's gotta be complete, before you start too.
So it's like, we don't want you coming in and. Half
You
finishing
want it to
one,
be a percentage complete before you start on it next.
so that way you don't have like. Streets nowhere, I don't know, something.
I don't think you wanna hold up where they can't until it's absolutely done and they're moving in. 'Cause then it's delaying it, making you go out further where they could have already had this part started while they're finishing up on this one.
They're gonna
And then
spend a
they're
lot
moving
of money
this whole
before it
street
ever
into this,
gets.
because now they've got that infrastructure in.
Yeah.
In
That's
that, in
true.
the plan, they're gonna spend a lot of money. So someone who's gonna spend a lot of money. Isn't gonna wanna spend that money needlessly.
That's true.
We're worried about making money, I mean, you're right, that thing was been it easy, we just gotta make sure we got them within the right constraints of doing what has to be done. That's
I
all.
don't wanna spend $1 million if I can't get it back.
Mhm.
But that's their problem, that ain't ours, ours is just make sure it's built the way we want it built, because they're all in it. Still.
And that's why you created the plan concept.
Right, that's, yeah. They know what they're gonna have to pay and we know what we're gonna get. Yeah,
Alright, well, we'll, revise it a little bit and come back to you guys.
I honestly think you'll know by the time it comes here to the final plan. Your comfort level with whoever's proposing that plan, whether you're gonna wanna permit phasing or not.
Yeah.
I really do. Staff should have a good understanding for that, especially, and even the engineers and that.
It's gonna be a good thing for the builder and also for the community. It's gotta be good for both of us.
So you're gonna approve the final plan, you're gonna approve the phasing plan with the final plan. So you're already gonna have, like you're saying, you're gonna see the concept, you're gonna see them come back to you once they've completed that. Then they're gonna propose this phasing plan, so you're gonna have a lot of information about the developer and the project before you say yes or no to the phasing plan. And the phasing plan is optional, not everyone's gonna have a phase. And you could say, you know what, we don't want you to face this today at all. You have to have the.
And you'll find out if they truly intended to do it to start.
And if they come to you with the phasing plan, most likely, I mean, from conversations we've had with other developers and things, if they're proposing phasing, they have a valid financial reason as to why. It makes financial sense for the cash flow of the project, for them to do this and this first, then follow with this and this, or whatever it is. So they're gonna present to you the detail of that plan. So my thought now is, the phasing plan should include timeline, scope of improvements for each phase, and how each phase will function independently and in conjunction with other phases. We could ask them the purpose or reasoning for the phasing plan. That would give you a lot of context for approval or denial. Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
I just have one, this is kind of going back a little bit, but we were talking about like side streets. So like, let's just say, like, this is applied, I'm thinking of like 9th Street, if they did, and like the hill was to be connected. And say that was a PUD. Would this help protect 9th Street from heavy traffic flow? If that connected to 40? And, or is somehow in this kind of written that written that way, because like that would.
Well, you have to remember too, that the hill was approved in 2005.
Oh, no, I'm just
2007.
using that as
But
an
I do,
example.
no, I do think, because that was my immediate thought whenever we were putting that section in there about traffic circulation. Because the hill would be technically not in compliance with that language. Because it will allow, once they connect that 40 highway, it will allow for through traffic and increased traffic in that subdivision. So this would actually protect us from that happening in the future.
Okay, that's what I was trying to make sure.
But
that in the
it's
future.
protecting us from those large arterial connections, not necessarily the 9th Street connection, because that one makes sense. You've got residential mixed with residential, it makes sense to connect those two. But when you're connecting 40 highway and the interchange with Main Street in Odessa, that's what that's trying to refrain from happening in that language.
Yeah, because 9th Street's not gonna be fun.
Okay, any other questions?
You could even got a lot of copies, I think.
We did, and we'll get some revisions to you guys at the next meeting.
Will that take care of all of the stuff that the Alderman said?
I do believe so. So the one thing that Colin had talked about, we kind of talked about this, was the parking discussion, and then everything else was addressed. So he did talk about minimum square footage for building use. But then again, that ties back to giving them the ability to differentiate between the size of the lots and the density in exchange for the open space. So not blanket restricting square footage, but allowing them the ability to present to you all the flexibility of something different. That's item number 4 on his list.
Is there any other business?
I was just gonna ask really quick, can we bring up ordinances to talk about next time? Like, can we talk about the parking? Kind of like what?
Yeah.
Shannon was talking about.
I don't know if I can bring it to you next time, but I.
But in
can
the
bring it
future,
back.
within, like, yeah. Okay, cool.
I have a laundry list of things for you guys to do.
I just wanted to make sure that one was on there. I didn't know if I was able to ask that, so I just wanted to double check.
Okay.
all I-
Okay. Is there a motion to discuss?
And make sure goodness.
Second?
Seconded, yes.
Any discussion?